Hi, everybody, and welcome to Metaphysical Insights. This is William Becker. I'm your host. And today I have the incredible Monique Rose as my guest
Hi.
in front of a very fitting part of her house, actually.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful background you've got.
Thank you.
Um, Monique, um, full disclosure, Monique and her husband Joss and I have been friends for a while. And we were chatting at the Oregon Ghost Conference a while back. I think it was there. And I thought, oh, this is a fascinating conversation. And I like the take she has on these issues. And so we thought we'd do the show. And Monique, I want to welcome you back. You and Joss were both on last time.
Yeah, thanks for having me back.
Oh, you're welcome. Um, well, before we get into the other nitty gritty, why don't you tell me a little bit about what's going on with you and tell the viewers? And because you've been really busy, you've got an incredible podcast that you and Joss do. You've been part of a second book. Um, y- you and this Sam's a really nice guy. He was in Seaside with us too. Um, you've got so much happening in life. Um, and so why don't you kind of give everybody a little update and how to reach you guys?
Sure. So, I am a writer, researcher, and a podcaster um, in the realm of all things paranormal and unexplained. And right now, we have a podcast called Fright Life Paranormal. And we have a new episode out every other Sunday. We record every other Sunday
Oops.
and just cover all kinds of topics of everything paranormal or unexplained. In addition to that, I have been featured in the literary journal The Feminine Macabre, which is a fantastic publication curated by Amanda Woomer and featuring all female writers and all females in the paranormal world, basically. So there's a lot of different types of articles in those journals. I'm featured in volume 4 and volume 6. Volume 6 just came out in mid-March. So definitely you guys would want to check that out. It's really great. And I'm honored to be a part of that.
Oh, this is fantastic. And how do they buy the books?
So you can check out our shop at frightlifeparanormal.com, where you'll have like our link tree to kind of everything else that we're working on as well. You can follow us on Instagram at frightlifeparanormal. We are both locked out of our Facebook right now. No real reason except just forgetting passwords and updating phones. So it got a little bit wonky there. So yeah, you'll find us just on all the social medias at Fright Life Paranormal and on our website.
And let's see. Um, did I spell this and put it up there right?
Fright Life.
Life. I
Yep.
had it right, and then I changed it.
Yeah.
How do I edit? Sorry, folks. I am I am a liberal arts major, um, somebody with a big history background and a medium, and I screw up technology.
The tech, I can't send GIFs. I can never send the animated GIFs for some reason. It's funny because Joss is so tech advanced, but I can't even send like it always just sends as the image. So you're already ahead of me working this format here and having me on your show and everything.
Now, let's see, Fright Life Paranormal.
Yes.
I also have a memory that doesn't always work as well as it should. Okay, let's try this again.
And on the website, we have our shop, and you can listen to our podcast directly from there as well. But you can also listen to us kind of anywhere you choose to listen to podcasts. Uh-oh.
Excellent. And I think I just spelled Freight Life, didn't I?
Yes.
Monique, do you see how you can type it?
Let's see. In the chat?
Yeah.
Okay.
Since I think I got 3 out of 3 wrong.
I think that should be. I sent it in the chat, but let's see about the comments here.
Okay. Oh, okay. It went into private chat and open copy link.
Hi to the people who are hanging out with us here today.
Yeah. Sorry, everybody. I went in, I took it out of the private chat and copied it and put it in.
Perfect.
So if it's not right, it's your fault this time, not mine.
Okay, sounds good.
Well, a little bit too. How did you get into this field?
So I grew up in a haunted house. I always heard little things kind of happening in the house, and my aunts and my mom talking about it in hushed tones, and it got me really interested. So I would just be wanting to investigate. I remember in early childhood, probably 10 years old or younger, taking my mom's cassette tapes and putting the tape over the like holes on top to record over it, and I would try to get EVPs with my little boom box. I don't know where I had seen that happen at that point, because that would have been the early 90s. And so, the ghost hunting shows and all of that weren't a big thing at that point, but I knew I wanted to do something around investigating, collecting data, and even just spooky stories. The whole that anthology, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. My school library with the old library cards was just my name, down the whole card. I would just check those out every time. So I was just kind of the weird girl who was into that stuff. And my family was really open to it, just for a fun, spooky tale. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so we've been kind of diving into it further now that we see that you can actually do more with that. The community is growing. It's okay to talk about it and talk about, that's what you do, and people don't look at you necessarily in the same way that it used to be kind of a super fringe thing. But so yeah, we're having fun with it and just kind of seeing where we can go with it.
I love it. And we've been working on events together, some fundraisers. Mm-hmm. We've got another one coming up at the Friends of the Ermitinger House on the 22nd solstice of June. So watch out, folks. I'll be sharing all the information when the tickets and stuff are up. And this is great. Lots of people signing up. And I'd like to go ahead and then delve into more of the topic we would talked about, because we were looking at possession and poltergeist activity, and had some interesting ideas and thoughts, and I don't even remember quite everything at the time. But I think I want to open that up and hear a little bit more about how you came to question and be attracted to these activities, and have you start the ball with your thoughts on them, because I was excited to hear them.
Okay, thank you. So my ideas are still sort of in their infancy. I haven't organized them completely, but in working in podcasting, I like to research as much as possible. So when we're covering a topic, like let's say the Bell Witch case, I read the book. The kind of the original source material of that is the book at that point, and research all of the accounts that are out there on the internet, try to sift through, what's real, what's source material, what's, just stories kind of snowballing, and really get into it. So I try to cross-reference as much as possible and understand what really takes place in these cases before I just present the material. I don't want to just kind of regurgitate information. I really like to absorb it and understand it so that I can present it in a way, maybe add new ideas to it, new theories. And in researching a lot of hauntings or poltergeist cases, I started to notice many similarities in these cases.
Okay.
And then I started to notice that matches a lot of early things and occurrences in possession cases as well. So I started to look at, is something deemed poltergeist or possession because of the lens of the religion on the case-to-case basis? It really depends. We look at things through our lens, our perspective that we've been given generally in life. So it got me thinking and really charting all of these well-known poltergeist cases, well-studied poltergeist cases, and possession cases. And there are so many things that line up as these like markers of what makes it a poltergeist case or a possession case. And I started to look at this and think of a few different things. Basically, we understand so far, we're told poltergeist is, from the German word meaning noisy ghost.
Right.
Poltergeist cases, unlike some typical hauntings, I guess, are more aggressive types of telekinetic energies, right? Something is being thrown around the house, fires are starting sometimes, and things like that. And a lot of people studying and researching these are now starting to think and theorize and understand that there's a host person in a poltergeist case. Something is feeding off of an energy, or a host person has opened up themselves to an entity that then kind of gets in there and disrupts the energy of the home. So I just wanted to really dive into that further, because there are a few theories around about anything in the paranormal. There are many theories, of course. We have more questions than answers.
Exactly. Proof I'm not sure is possible.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just saying I'm not sure proof is possible.
Right. And so it's just fun to kind of look at these things. And I try to do it in a systematic way. Basically, I'm just list making and categorizing occurrences in well-known cases. And I started to wonder about it even being, well, the first thing is maybe the lens of that religion. So are all poltergeist cases and possession cases essentially the same thing, just looked at through a different lens? Additionally, what made me think of those and lump them together, besides just how they start with scratching in the walls, most people do. That's the first thing, is they check for rodents infestations and things like that, because a lot of them hear the scratching in the walls as one of the first indicators. And then, bumps and noises at night, and then things in the house start to levitate or be thrown, and then someone usually comes out as being like the main person involved or around when these things are happening. Oftentimes the host person becomes ill in some way and starts having physical reactions. That's both present in a standard poltergeist case and in a possession.
Right.
And that's usually when a Catholic family would call in a priest, and then the priest would sort of drive how the rest of that goes. But even speaking in different voices, different languages, of course, there's this aspect of psychological health involved in these things too. You always want to look at that. But what I noticed when I first started just combining those ideas is there was, more often than not, in the cases I've looked at, some sort of trauma experience that the host person in these cases has gone through prior to these things beginning to happen in the home.
Right.
And so I started to wonder if these poltergeist or possession cases are not even necessarily a haunting type of entity, but some sort of triggered trauma response that is more scientific and something in our brain that has switched on, that the host person is unconsciously aware of. So there's not necessarily a third entity involved, but it is that person projecting these telekinetic powers, basically. And this is not a new thought. I just came to it organically and then realized, yeah, that's out there. What's the negative effect on, what are negative effects on telekinetic energy? I think that's even like a line in Ghostbusters when he's like, I'll tell you what the effect is. It's pissing me off. When he's zapping him if he's getting the cards wrong.
Right.
Trying to produce something negative to see if it manifests that energy. So yeah, I think that it's this kind of uncontrolled, unconscious manifestation of that. And they can't control the energy, and they don't know that it's even them most of the time.
Right.
And so it can trigger all sorts of other psychological things and physical things as well, to the person, like physically becoming ill, swelling up, that happens, getting fevers, and being unconscious a lot of the time because they're going through so much turmoil. So the Society for Psychical Research does have papers on this. So
yes.
I was just excited that I kind of came to these ideas, and they're all still scattered, of course. So now I'm just trying to absorb as many of these research and research papers as possible, and then kind of get that out there as a theory.
Well, and more of what we were talking about fits into place now too. And I'm sorry, conversations and everything over time. It was 3 weeks ago, and so
yeah.
But this fits along with so much too with what I think, and some of what part of why I was excited too, I remember, is because there is part of the literature that also has come up with some of what you've come up with independently. But I also think sometimes we can create a temporary type of being. It's not something that was part of a soul at one point. It's purely emotional energy, and that doesn't have to be negative. It can be positive.
Right.
And sometimes the energy we have calls in the being, which is part of what you were saying. And sometimes something might already be there, and then it feeds off that energy, which then helps it create more of that energy to feed off of by causing more trauma.
Right.
And I think there's room for all of those things to be taking place in various degrees. I get frustrated with it has to be this or that.
Right.
No, it doesn't. There's no reason why. And with the Catholic Church and or therapeutical psychological issues, they now do a huge psychological and physiological assessment before they will even take on a supposed possession, because we know now that the guy throwing himself in the fire wasn't possessed, he was epileptic. And so many of these stories from scripture, they weren't demons, they were illnesses, and they weren't anybody's fault. And so it's exciting to see you coming up and talking about these pieces in a way that is actually also not judgmental to the people that are at the center of them.
Right.
Yeah. How many times do you think at least some of it's faked or created to get attention?
I don't know. It's hard to say. I know that we kind of brought up, because in my cataloging these things, I looked at the Enfield poltergeist.
Right.
And that was what, in the UK in the 70s?
I think so.
Yeah. And that one, a lot of people have tried to debunk because the kids came forward and said, hey, we did a couple of these things, or they got caught doing a couple of things. My theory on that, because there were so many trained observers on that case, you know, police officers went in to investigate this. And I think that it doesn't mean that the entire case is necessarily debunked because they caught the kids latching onto that attention, liking it, and trying to kind of play it up. Of course, it does put it on some shaky ground because you wonder how much of it was faked. But I think that it still deserves a pretty deeper look to see if you can kind of pick apart if there was that foundation of what was really happening. And then the kiddos just kind of were like, well, we don't want this to stop, so we have to keep this up and keep them wanting to come back and study this. But there were so many people investigating that case and in that home firsthand seeing these things happen that the kids couldn't have, certain things the kids couldn't have done.
I don't know how a 13-year-old can make themselves levitate.
Yeah.
And that was seen by police officers.
Right.
And social workers, I think. And I mean, people that were trained to be observant.
Right.
And were not superstitious about, they weren't the kind of people that were looking to explain everything as paranormal.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And even things like the Amityville case, which is a little bit different than a standard poltergeist, but I would say that it falls into that because the father of the home was affected by it. So I think he was starting to maybe be that host person, kind of waking up at 3 a.m. And of course, I think that you're going to play certain things up if you're getting media attention. If you're not in the field already, if you're not trying to investigate this and be, and it just kind of happens to you, telling your story, first of all, I don't think is a red flag. A lot of people think anyone writing a book or trying to sell their story, the rights to their story, is discredited automatically. If something crazy started happening to me, I would be like, hey, I'm going to write about this, or I'm going to tell people. I don't think that necessarily would discredit someone. I know that that's sort of the number one stop for a lot of people is, well, how much are they getting paid to tout this information? But I still think that can come out in an earnest way. You just have to look at each case and see kind of your own intuition. How do you read it? How does it come off for you? So who really knows?
People write autobiographies all the time.
Right.
What's the difference between this and an actor or a major politician, historic figure, or somebody else writing about their life?
Right.
And sure, they're going to make some money off of it. That doesn't mean it's not historically accurate.
Right. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I just think, I don't know how many are faked. I don't know if there are just aspects of certain ones that are faked or played up for, entertainment value, like anything on TV or out there in pop culture. But that's why I try to really get to that as much source material as possible. For Amityville, I was reading the police reports, not just the book or not just watching the movie and viewing it as a documentary or source material.
Things like movies, TV shows, they are written for the financing powers to make money. And they may or may not have certain amounts of accuracy, but the purpose for them is different than telling the truth at all cost.
Right.
For commercial anyway. Now, if you're looking at a PBS documentary, I'm pretty comfortable with their dedication to honesty and fairness.
Right. Yep.
That doesn't mean there isn't a lot of truth in a lot of these things. And it also doesn't mean, even if a movie or a TV has been co-opted for profit instead of truth, that doesn't mean that the people that were involved in it didn't have experiences. And it doesn't mean they were part of the fake. I know of a TV show that a friend of mine was on, and a lot of things were faked. The people that were being doing the work that was being affected in the investigations didn't know that. They weren't part of it. The production crew did it, and the two groups of people were never really allowed to talk.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah, so you have one group of people that are working in good faith and thinking these things are actually happening, when you've got another group of people that are faking it. So I'm
Right.
just a long-winded way of saying don't necessarily judge and criticize the person whose story it is in the film or whatever. Take it with a grain of salt, look at it as information, and
Right.
then do what you're doing. You're going to legitimate sources.
Right.
You're going to police reports, you're going to doctor reports, you're going to
Hmm.
so many different things that are going to give you a much better picture. And also, then what else is in the area? Radon gas is a big thing, and it can make
Hmm.
you feel very hallucinogenic.
Yeah.
I mean, there are just so many things that radon or carbon monoxide poisoning can do,
Hmm.
um, and medications. And um, okay, there's a lot of stress in this person's life. Well, maybe there is a mental illness issue starting that's really triggering all this, and it isn't. There might be a poltergeist, but the possession has nothing to do with this paranormal activity. It has to do with the strain on this person's mental health that needs
Right.
to be addressed.
Right.
Yeah, I think we need to look at it as a one size, or each case is separate, not a one size
Hmm.
fits all. I mean,
Right, right. It's helpful to catalog them as well and just see if there are these profile points that match up because it's just
right.
interesting. But of course, no, it doesn't mean that I'm correct that they're all connected or they're all from the same thing. It was just so strange that in certain cases the trauma is mentioned as sort of just background information, but not pointed out as a marker in what kind of started, prompted, or facilitated what happened next. And
Right.
that was something where I had to sort of suss that out a little bit more. It's
Hmm.
it's been kind of glazed over a little bit. And then there are ones where you have to consider what is a trauma to somebody. So in the case of Enfield, I believe that their family had moved and relocated, and that was something where that's a trauma for some people, and a lot of times young kids who only know life as a certain way and then they move and start a whole new thing somewhere else. That can be traumatic for certain people. So then also kind of pulling back and not looking at trauma necessarily as something as intense as like what happened in the Esther Cox case in which is what I wrote about in this new volume of the Feminine Macabre. And she was the haunted girl of Amherst, and it was a
I don't
poltergeist
know
case.
her.
So it was in the late 1800s. Fascinating case out of Nova Scotia, near Nova Scotia, and it's really interesting. So definitely, I wrote the article about it. It's in the book, so check it out. But that's one of the cases that got me really interested, is they sort of mentioned an actual assault that she had gone through a couple of weeks before these poltergeist activities started happening in the home. Between
Okay.
the assault and the activity, which were things like levitating bed dressings and fires starting and little matches falling from the sky, and her family, including doctors in the community, would come by and see these things happening.
Hmm.
So they had firsthand accounts of this. But yeah, between that time, she was just really despondent and kind of withdrawn. And then suddenly, just this outburst of strange energy in the home, like water boiling on the countertop with no heat source, things like that doctors and trained observers, even at that time in the 1800s, were writing down and noting. And
Right.
one of the doctors in that case looked at it and said that she had somehow become, his theory, that she had somehow become some sort of human battery. And so he noted immediately that Esther was like the main person, the host. And while
Uh-huh.
some people were being really superstitious about it, this doctor in the community had the theory that she was somehow expelling energy or feeding the energy. So that actually is in the book, The Haunted Girl of Amherst by Walter Hubble. He went in and studied her as well. He was an actor at the time in Canada with a theater troupe, and I guess, just an amateur paranormal researcher. He actually used to try to call out, catch out, and debunk mediums in that area.
Okay.
And so he was highly interested in it. He was a believer, but he really wanted to get down to, the people who are telling the truth and things that they could witness at the time firsthand.
Fantastic.
But some people look at him too as he exploited her. He did end up taking her around to lecture halls and selling tickets. Come see the haunted
Right.
girl of Amherst.
Mhm.
So that was probably not the best for her in a traumatic situation, but they made a deal to do that, and I'm not sure if he was trustworthy or not. I wasn't around back then,
Right.
or if he made the right decisions by taking her around. But it was just another interesting thing where it just so happened that she went through a traumatic event a couple of weeks before this started.
Right. That makes sense. Let's see. Let me put it back up.
Oh, yeah. Do you mean, so, I mean, really, this isn't just saying there aren't ghosts or other types of experiences. Of course,
Right.
anyone can experience, seeing energies or entities, tapping into that realm, I think.
Right.
These aren't mutually exclusive ideas. I'm just
Right.
trying to kind of catalog and see if there are any more similarities that possibly one way a poltergeist is created is by being triggered by a traumatic event.
Right. And I really applaud the efforts to organize and catalog. And my comments earlier weren't about what you're doing, because you're actually showing that there can be a link with multiple things affecting and creating or part of the same issue or different ones, or how this can all work together in so many different formats. And I think that's important. The more we can understand, I think the better. And I think what you're doing can have some real validity in showing, yeah, it's not either or. It can be this, or it can be that, or it can be this, or whatever. And that makes a lot of difference and makes a lot of sense. And just in my experience, one with the paranormal, with entities, and also just watching people for all the years I've been around. Yeah, it was horrible assault. I've known Joe's a good friend in England, and he's somebody I actually visit when I'm over there and such. We were just texting earlier today and talking about which ghosts are hanging out where.
Oh, yeah.
He's good at telling me I have company.
Oh, great. Well, yeah, no, thank you for sharing that, Joe, also. But yeah, I do think that something like that can trigger, a change or an awareness of what, was already there, but maybe you didn't know before. It's just something unlocking. I think that's kind of what I'm working on, trying to figure out anyway.
Yeah. I love it. You're approaching things in a way that is so refreshing and not what I usually hear about. Because you're putting in the academic research and looking at the connections. One of the things I love about history is how things from this period here are associated and affected by what's going on here, and they're both affected by what happened 3,000 years before up here, and now something else down here. And you're working on that same kind of a concept in a sense with all of these pieces. And how does the whole picture work? And I think it's important work to do. I really do.
Thanks.
And
Yeah,
you've
it's
got a
fun.
good, yeah, and you're very good at being detailed, and your critical thinking skills are good. And those are things that are, frankly, they're difficult to find in the paranormal world sometimes. And I'm not trying to be critical. It's just people often choose to bring forward that which supports their idea.
Right.
And you're creating ideas out of looking at all the facts you can gather.
Right.
And what does that show you?
Right. I mean,
And
I would
that's,
love. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, that's a scientific approach. That's an honest academic approach to most things. And I
Right. And
applaud it.
that's what I love. That's how I love to approach it. Of course, I also have to restrain myself sometimes when you get caught in the moment if you're investigating
Oh,
to
sure.
drive a narrative, even. But
Mhm.
sorry, traffic's loud out there. That's something that I am being bothered by more and more. Is I see people trying to drive a certain narrative. They get, 1 or 2 word response when conducting an investigation, like a field work. So they get something in the spirit box that says 2 words, and they use those 2 words to completely make an entire narrative of what that entity wants, where they came from, what they're interested in, or what crimes or, wrongdoings they've been a part of. And I just think that that's too much. It's too editorialized most of the time.
Right.
And it can be fun to be like, oh, they said this. I wonder if maybe, they robbed a train car and live nearby. And I don't even know. But a lot of the times it's just like too much artistic liberty with that.
Right.
But I guess I'm trying to balance those 2 worlds. I love the storytelling aspect
Mhm.
and, having kind of that spooky vibe and having fun just telling scary stories and wondering like, oh, who's knocking? I wonder if that's so-and-so who used to live in the house. That is fun. But then
Right.
there's also that side of me that's like, okay, well, what could have caused that? And let's find, the real historic who lived here. Like, let's look back at actual records and
Right.
catalog this and figure out really what that is, and try not to apply our own ideas into it creatively, I guess.
Exactly. And I mean, that's what any good historian should do, any good scientist should do, anybody doing research should do. And I think the stories that come out of it are actually more interesting than the fiction, or part fiction, part truth. I mean, part lies. Because I just find over and over again, and I'll use some of these Game of Thrones or different things, and I'm not trying to put any of this stuff down, and billions of people love it, and it's good business for the tourist industry in places where they're filmed, and I'm not, but they're fiction, they're not fact. And when I'm reading about the same time period or watching a good documentary, I find the real life story to be better, more interesting, and captivating than I do the fiction. Right, Eric. And so it's good to see more of that. And we're working in an interesting field with a lot of different motivations, like
Right.
any field,
Right.
and people all over. And so we have to be careful and aware. And I know I have activity in my house all the time, but that doesn't mean every time I hear or see something, I don't look to see, okay, what could have triggered that that's not a ghost. And I
Right.
use that, I'm saying that not to define what a ghost is, but entity is a better word. That's what I usually use. Because sometimes I find, oh, the clear story window in that room, when a car comes just right and the light at night is so, will come through and reflect off something if the doors open right, that comes over here and bounces off there and then creates a little pattern over here. And okay, it's not a ghost.
Yeah. And another aspect of that, and not trying to take an idea too much with minimal information and run with it, is also just being responsible in storytelling. So that's one side that's not as scientific. So now we all have, these stories of the white lady. That's a known trope in the paranormal and in many hauntings. And of course that's fun, to kind of just have your own resident ghost and she's nondescript. But a lot of times people will tell certain stories and certain tropes that are like, oh, her heart was broken and she was left at the altar, so she jumped from the window and then she haunts the shores. And if that were me, I would be, and I'm like, excuse me, I am a strong, independent woman and I am a strong, independent ghost. I do not want to be known forever as someone who did that. And of course there's, a lot of problems with that. I'm not judging anyone who is going through heartbreak. I'm just saying we're labeling that entity and that person and forever and then telling that story over and over again. And what if we're just wrong because we just assumed so many things rather than like really looking into it and investigating it and verifying accounts and names and dates and actual death records.
And was there anybody else in the room that might have helped her with that decision?
Right.
And I've stayed in the room that some of these people have done that from. I stayed in the Gray Lady in Black's room in one of my favorite hotels in England, the Old Bell in Malmesbury. It was built in 1220 as a hotel.
Oh, wow.
And she did let me see her as an apparition. I mean, I could smell the must of the clothes. She was just right beside me on the stairs. And I was looking forward, so I just saw her like this. And I didn't want to move my head and really look because I was afraid I'd scare her away by moving. But so I saw her like that for several seconds, and it was really quite an honor. And other people have done, and they had a portrait of her in the hotel too.
Oh, wow.
So yeah. It was cool.
Yeah,
but
that's great. And some of those stories are accurate, but it's just making sure we're not latching on to preconceived notions and, like I said, just sort of running with it.
Exactly. Yeah. And, we don't know the whole situation behind all of that either. In some cases, especially when you're going back far enough, women had so little power. And if you're getting to a certain point, okay, well, there's my meal ticket to a decent life. And that's not a judgmental thing or saying she's a bad person either. It's how things often work. You bring certain things into, they were business negotiations as much as anything. Or my family's been impoverished, and by the time I'm 50, I'm going to be sleeping under the stairs and eating, sharing the garbage with the rats. And so it's like, okay, the window, it has nothing to do with a broken heart. It has long-term practicality issues. I mean, it's just as a possibility. And people had accidents all the time in those days. People fell out of windows. And, if you're looking at a period of time during the Victorian where a lot of gas lights are being used, they're suffocating themselves. Talk about carbon monoxide poisoning.
Right.
Often.
Yeah, it was a dangerous time for sure.
Yeah. And so a lot of things could have been very accidental. And we take them to be something else.
Yeah, for sure. Now, my light turned off. And I'm talking about trying to be rational and not run with ideas. But then I'm also like, ooh, why did my light turn off? What were we talking about? Who was trying to signal me?
Does that light usually have trouble?
No.
And
it may be that the battery, it's probably a battery life thing. That's the most logical explanation.
Okay. Well, if you figure it out, let me know,
Okay.
because things happen during these podcast or these casts in the shows where people see things happen in my house, or people have things happen in their house.
Yeah.
And I know you have activity in your house.
Yes. And that comes up when we're recording episodes as well.
Right. And lights, if it keeps coming on, then it seems like a battery would be more either on or off.
Right. I mean, like we said at the top of the show, neither of us are tech savvy. Let's see if I
Right.
can.
Joe, I'm not quite sure what you mean. But yeah. Eh,
It can be fun when
it
things
is.
happen.
All the ones in my house have all been very nice.
Mm-hmm.
No, they have scared people in the guest room in particular. I've had people say, I'm not staying there anymore.
Oh wow.
Most people are fine with it, although one person did wake up screaming when she woke up briefly and saw my mom.
Oh no. And you're like, it's just, she's nice.
Yeah. Okay, Joe. Thank you. I will.
That used to happen at my family home growing up. My aunts and my mom would have cousins over, neighborhood friends over to stay the night, and they refused. Everyone loved the house and hanging out there. It was a good spot to be with friends and family. But then at night, people were like, "I'm out. Can't be here."
You need to take me by the house, because I know you've told me basically where it is. I know it's close to where I live, but I would love to see it.
Yeah, it's a good one. It just went back on the market. My family had owned it since the mid 70s, and we were devastated to have to sell it after my grandparents both were gone. But yeah, it's a lovely home. It's very strange. I'm writing a book series about our time there as a family, like the multiple generations and the hauntings and sort of how that got me into this field. It'll be just sort of based on a true story.
I can't wait to read that.
It's going to be fun.
That's
I've
going
got
to be
the
so
outline,
great.
but yeah, it's a beautiful place. It's many of our like fondest memories, our happy place, but also it had this strange, dark seeming entity. And that's kind of one of the things that got me thinking about what triggers things like that. Is it trauma? Is it, people talk about generational curses, and that can mean, of course, everyday things that are much different than actual curses or hauntings. But just really looking into how multiple generations of my family loved it there, but we also have stories of a dark figure skulking out of the closet in the middle of the night and like coming toward a group of young girls staying the night, or grabbing our legs while we were sleeping, and just strange things like that. And how it's still just a lovely place that we love to be all the time. Like, how do those two things exist? So I'm really trying to crack that open.
Right. And well, it also then begs the question of me, what was the intent? Okay, it's a dark creature or dark being, but that just means it's dark. Does that mean
physically?
It doesn't mean it's
like
evil
shadow,
or nasty necessarily. What's the motivation behind grabbing the legs? Is it playing and having fun, or is it there's so many questions. Yeah. That's where mediums come in.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we can establish what that is.
Yeah. Well, and it did. We should have gone in there. I did. I went to look at it when it came back on the market. I wondered if I could somehow purchase the home back myself. It didn't work out.
Okay.
But I got back in there. We had the hauntings happening since the late 70s. and they're possibly tied into other places my aunts and uncles moved to, had activity in those places as well. Probably every single one of my aunts has lived in a haunted house, and they all grew up in this main house in Oregon City.
Okay.
So really interesting, because there are a lot of like offshoots. But I'm trying to line that up and think, okay, well, did this one incident that took place in Dundee, Oregon, when my eldest aunt moved out on her own, did that bring something back to this house? Or, you know, what created it? Was it there first? You know, just really trying to ask the questions and theorize. But yeah, it was a really interesting house. I got back in there. My grandmother passed away in the house. My grandfather did not pass away in the house, but he passed away nearby at work. He was up before dawn every morning mowing the fairways at the golf course, and had a lot of pride in his work, and worked every day until, you know, in his 80s.
Wow.
And
Did they own the house? I
yes.
mean, the golf course?
No, he just
Okay.
was a long-term groundskeeper at the Oregon City Golf Course.
I love that golf course.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And then my mom actually passed away in the house as well. So it was strange being back in there after so many years and kind of feeling like, and this is this is something that's not necessarily true, but I had that thought of wanting to get back in there. Like, we left our ghosts there, like our family, they're there, and now they're with, you know, a different family. Of course, that's not necessarily how that works, but it's a thought you have, you know, like even now we're moving. So us looking at that home actually prompted the whole, let's maybe look at buying a different house kind of process. And we found one that we love, and we're in the process, and hopefully everything is all good. It's greenlit. It's going well.
I was wondering what that process, how that was going, because that's exciting.
Yeah, it's looking positive. So we're still on track. But yeah, I have that thought here. We've been in this apartment for 18 years, which is a crazy amount of time. And I'm like, my mom has been here. So if I move, she won't have been to my new house.
But when your child was born, and everything else too.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you've had a lot of life in that place, in the apartment. So.
Right.
And
so
it's
yeah,
a
it's hard to
fabulous
leave.
apartment.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really cool. It's really unique. And that's sort of why we never really felt motivated to find somewhere else, because it's a unique place, and a unique Tudor building that's been here since it was a general store downstairs. And Joss's dad remembers coming by and getting little treats at the general store. And so it's really cool.
Well, it was around when my dad was a kid. And I always remember the building. It was always when it was cool, that I liked as a kid. And I don't remember what was downstairs at the time. We didn't stop. It was just, and there were a couple other buildings that were similar around it, I think, at the time.
Okay.
And I think there was a bullfrog, a place where they raised bullfrogs or something right by there too.
Interesting.
My grandparents built the house that my dad was born in 1929, not terribly far. It's on the other side of the highway and up the hill and a little further north, but it's all part of the same neighborhood, and it's part of an area they would have walked to. Long walk, but or streetcar at times. So they knew it. It was Oak Grove.
Yeah. So cool.
Yeah. I love it. I absolutely love it. And I was going to say something else. Ask about something else, and I can't remember. ADHD brains. We'll have to chat offline and see. Because I'd like to, if it hasn't sold yet, it would be nice to get back. I'd like to see it.
Yeah.
Just to get a feel for it myself. I'm not
Right.
promising I can answer any questions, but I I know it's a place that had a big impact on your whole
Yeah.
family. So
Yeah. I know it is. I wish I could have investigated it while we were in there, of course, um, but I don't know. Maybe also some things are kind of just left, and I'll figure it out while I'm writing about it, and then maybe we can get back in there soon, depending on what that looks like. But yeah, beautiful place, and definitely formed a lot of why I do this and how I
right.
do it.
Now, do you know the history of the house before your family bought it?
No, that's something that we bought it from my grandfather's, um, like a work colleague, and so it had only been in the hands of one family briefly before ours, like the physical house. Now the
Okay.
land, my aunts and uncles used to. It's 4 acres that goes back toward Beaver Creek, like actual
Right.
Beaver Creek, and they used to find artifacts back by the creek and bring like pioneer time artifacts back to the house to my grandma. So I mean,
Wow.
the land could hold, and does, I'm sure, hold a lot of history and layers of stories and time, for sure.
That could be where all of the activity comes from.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right. Because the house was built, I believe, and of course I have this all in my notes somewhere, but I'm always investigating multiple things at a time. So
Right.
dates and things don't stick in here. But I believe late 50s is when it was built. So it wasn't, by the time my grandparents purchased it in the early mid 70s, it wasn't that old of a home.
Right.
So not a lot of history in the home itself. We do know the family who we purchased it from and actually grew up with that entire family. So that was
Did
cool.
they have stories?
No. So we did ask about that, or at least none that they were willing to admit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and that doesn't mean the ghost came with you. It could be that you're just more observant to them,
Right.
or that they liked you guys better to come out and play,
Mm-hmm.
or there was something with energy that helped trigger them.
Right.
They could
Right.
have already been there,
Yeah.
but
And
it
I,
also could have been some of the stuff that the kids were bringing up from the
mm-hmm.
creek.
Right. Yeah. So many possibilities.
Yeah,
So
I
really
love it.
interesting.
Do y- do the f- do you guys still have some of the artifacts that they would find?
I don't know. I mean, I asked my aunts and they just couldn't even remember
Okay.
like what my grandma would have done with them. Probably take them to like flea market type things to see if anyone knew about them. She did have a lot of antiques that we have now. Like we have some of her things, of course.
Uh-huh.
Um, so I'm not sure exactly like if there's some hidden gems within her items that maybe came from there,
Right.
that some of my aunts have, but they
Check
couldn't
for
recall.
check for secret compartments.
Yeah. Yeah.
The drawer that's not obvious.
Right.
Oh, no, I love it. Um, well, we're for most of the people watching that I see here, most of the people in the chat, we are quite new as far as Caucasian history comes.
Hmm.
Is the lamp still going on and off?
Yeah. It just turned down now, but it has a whole new battery pack, so it shouldn't really be doing anything.
Yeah, that's interesting. And it's a battery pack, so it's not old wiring or something.
Right. No, it's just a ring light on a battery pack. And Joss came in and swapped out the battery pack to a new one. And then it dimmed significantly, but it's still on. And you can only dim
Yeah,
it with the remote. I mean, if you're dimming the stages. So that's
yeah, and
attached over there.
Olivia's not in the back room playing with the remote.
No, she's not here. She's at a friend's house.
Oh, good for her.
But yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me know, but I think it's a good chance that it's a paranormal. I'm not
Yeah. Yeah, now with the second thing, because that shouldn't really be happening. A battery pack dying, of course, is
right.
completely within the realm of possibilities, but this new pack should be sufficient. And then it's like you said, it's kind of either on or off when you're powering a light.
Right.
I would think.
And I think there's a child,
Oh, here.
playing
Yeah.
with it. That's what I think.
Okay.
We'll see.
Yeah.
But milk and cookies.
Okay. Yeah, we've never investigated here. I know we had you for dinner once when Olivia was little, I think
Right.
2, because I would see a small entity, like low to the floor, kind of running by in my, just the corner of my eye all the time.
Right.
And then her toys would go off,
Right.
which sometimes that's a battery thing, malfunction, or who knows what triggers those, how sensitive they are. But yeah, certain toys that you have to like push the buttons, that stuff would go off in the middle of the night.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, William, can you come and see what you get from here?
Yeah, and I can't remember what I picked up. I know that it wasn't anything nasty,
No.
but I can't remember what it was.
We've had some strange things. And I think that there's some things, of course, in and out, because that's a whole nother can of worms, is like, what are the rules if you're a ghost? Are you just stuck to a house? Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So, but a lot of people are like, well, the house has to be old. The thing is stuck there unless somebody releases it or helps pass it on. There are all these things that are just, I don't necessarily subscribe to that idea. But my daughter, she's always been kind of afraid of the hallway, and she is fearless in everything else.
Mm-hmm.
But every once in a while, she will say, like, oh, can you come with me to brush my teeth? Now, this is a kid who is comfortable being left alone. She came out the other night and she was upset that I was still here because I was going to meet somebody. And she's like, oh, I wanted to sing and do my like Broadway songs. So I didn't want you in the living room. So she likes her space. She's not afraid to be alone. She's never been afraid of the dark. And she's always just been so advanced, emotionally mature, really intelligent. But for some reason, she's afraid of the hallway that leads to the bathroom. And that's the only time I've ever had a feeling of something dark. And I believe I called you when that happened.
Yeah.
I heard like 3 heavy knocks in the hallway. And then I had scratch on my arm at the same time. And I had just been on the phone talking with somebody, just chatting and catching up. So it wasn't anything, we weren't getting spooky. We weren't watching scary movies. I wasn't investigating.
Right.
So whatever that was, it was just a brief thing. And then, we don't have any kind of long-term things happening. Josh sees things all the time, just like peeking around door frames.
Yep.
And then one day, a box of cereal, our kitchen. So this building is from, I don't know if the layout is true to how it was, but this building was built in the 20s or late 1918 to 1922. I'm not exactly sure. But the kitchen is a full closed off kitchen. So we've got like the swingy door on one side and one door, and that the swingy door leads to the formal dining room, which is actually commandeered as Olivia's room instead of having a dining room. But anyway, Joss's office is across from the kitchen, but there's a long hallway between the two and doorways. And the kitchen is all closed cabinets all the way around the perimeter. And one day a box of cereal was just standing between Joss's office and the kitchen on the floor in like the entryway of our home. But
okay.
Yeah, so that was, and nobody was home. Olivia was at school. Joss had been home. He works from home.
Right.
He was trying to figure out how a box of cereal could have even gotten out of the cupboard. There's no way it would have even fallen. It's like several, 15, 20 feet away to even the cupboard.
Yeah.
So really interesting.
I like it. Yeah, it is interesting.
They're all just fun little anomalous things, though. Nothing consistent really here.
Yeah. When I have a particular coin that shows up occasionally in different places, and it's a 10 kopeck piece. And so I just know that's grandma because it's Russian currency, and we're Germans, but we're Germans that had lived in Russia.
Yes.
And so, and I have Russian currency in the house because I've been. But so when that coin, it first showed up, in the study on the sofa after a party, and I have witnesses that it wasn't there beforehand.
Okay.
And after all the coats were taken off, it was under the coats. And nobody would have put a coat on it anyway. And it clearly stood out on the fabric of the sofa in the study. So, it would have been very obvious. And so, like, okay, hi, Grandma, you're always welcome.
Yeah, that's
And
cool.
sometimes I have to ask, okay, who's dying this time? But because she came with one of my cousins the night before, one of my uncles right before.
Mm-hmm.
So, but she just likes to say hi. But things like the car keys winding up underneath the dining room table, that's not Grandma. That's just whatever's coming in and playing around.
Yeah. Minor
And
disruptions.
I've tried too. I mean, I've knocked them off the table or off the chair they might have been in. It's carpeted, so they don't bounce.
Mm-hmm.
They're not round. They've got the key fob on them, and there's no way that they could fall off and wind up where they wound up.
Mm-hmm.
And it has happened more than once. So it's things like that, or something's under a tray, and I say, okay, I'll leave it there because I know where it is, and if I put it someplace safe, I'll lose it,
Yeah.
and I need it tomorrow. And then I go to find it, and it's gone. And then I come back an hour later, and it's right back there.
Oh,
And,
wow. Yeah.
As long as they give it back,
Right.
it's cool. Just don't make me miss a deadline.
Yeah.
Yeah. But oh, well, this has been wonderful. I always enjoy talking. Is there anything else that you would like to add or promote
No, I
before we
think
wind up?
just the Feminine Macabre book. Check out her entire series, Amanda Woomer, The Feminine Macabre. And yeah, just check out our podcast. We do have an episode, or 2 episodes actually, that cover our family home. It's called part 1 is called Haunted Henrici, and let me know what you think about it because I'm going to be diving into really writing that book here pretty soon.
Good.
It's slow going, of course, as you know, as a
I do
writer,
author. You're much more disciplined than I am.
Oh, I don't know about that. I try, but it's when you have a day job too, it's a little tricky.
Yeah, and yours is not exactly like just 9 to 5.
Right. Exactly. But
Yeah.
no, well, thank you for having me.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for being on. I'm excited, and this has been great. So
yeah, it's fun.
I appreciate it.
And then just everyone stay tuned for the info on the solstice event that we'll be working on together. That's exciting. And probably coming up fast.
Right. And I'm hoping that we get tickets and everything else up soon. That's up to the treasurer, though, of the Friends of the Yimmer House. This event's going to take place in the 3rd oldest house in Oregon, oldest in Clackamas County. It's where the city of Portland was named. It's got more history involved with it than almost any place in the state. And okay, again, we're new, but for here, it's pretty amazing, and it's so haunted. We've had lots and lots of experiences there, so this will be a fun event
for sure. Great. Oh, you're mentioning we're new because we're talking to people from the UK who are like, that's not old history.
Yeah.
Who laugh at us West Coast Americans with this is from the 1800s.
Yeah. And even the East Coast, because Oh, I had friends that lived in Marblehead, and their house was one of the new ones in the old part of town. It was built in 1769.
Hmm.
When you're up in New England, you can see inns and houses that go back to the 1600s.
Yes, I
Even
saw in Georgetown,
right,
I think the oldest home. I need to look. I'll get that information. I have a cool picture of it.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, Georgetown was really cool. When I went to DC, that was a
yeah.
lot of fun.
And then when you start getting down into parts of Florida, the Spanish were there so
Hmm.
early. St. Peter's Bay, St. Augustine, St. I keep saying St. Petersburg, but is that right?
Yeah, there's a St. Pete's. Yeah,
Yeah, that's what I thought. But then I was starting to get confused with Russia.
right.
Anyway,
No, we have them. We both have it.
yeah. Sorry about that, folks. I actually do know these things pretty well. I've been to it. Um, brain farts all over today. But so there is some older stuff, just not here as far as the European background. Lots of Native American, but
Right.
technically they were prehistoric. They didn't have written records. And so there wasn't really anything written about them until the Europeans got out here. So
Yeah.
it's not a judgment, that's just a statement of the reality of the
Right.
times. So, cool. Anyway, Monique, thank you.
Thank you.
Give my best to your family, and we'll chat soon.
All right. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Take care.